Alright, magnetic gauging device installation instructions for the threaded version. 1. Do not remove the individual gated device component of the packaging until the time it is installed with each of the components. This will keep them clean and undamaged. Ensure the opening through the pressure plate is at least 1.5 inch. 1.5 inch of the scribe with allow the guide to fit with the pressure plate. Slide the guide tube through the opening of the pressure plate with the tube at the top of the upper spring with the collar of the float with the lower spring with the collar must be always slid onto the guide tube to the end of the NPT connection with the guide with the tube. The NPT non-pressure tightening with the pressure plate with the tightening is required with a square fitting above with the threads with the guide tube can be welded with the pressure as desired. 3/8-inch filled weld using a stainless steel rod. The AWSE 309 is equal to is recommended. The weld is not to be undercut with the underspring. Collar must be installed with the spring fastened down, facing down with the C-figure 1. The floating Teflon guide with the bushing with the interface between the float with the guide tube on the bushing. One bushing is red, but the other bushing is wet. The float must be installed with the guide with the tube with the red bushing toward the pressure plate. The white bushing toward the bottom of the tank at the end of the float with the red bushing and the dash with the words top, letters top. Once the float is inside with the guide tube, it must be protected at all times with a heat welder spare with always slide the float with the guide tube away from the area being welded. The lower spring collar must be installed with the spring facing C-figure 1. His installer is responsible to ensure that the float does not come in contact with the tank shelf of the pressure plate with the other structural member. The clearance of 1 inch of the recommended plate between float and any structural member of the top spring shall be placed whenever the compressor of the float is kept in contact. Anything but the spring, the top spring must allow the highest desired outage to be revved. The bottom of the spring should be placed low enough to ensure the lowest desired outage could be revved with the tack weld collars to guide to keep them in place. And then it shows your top bushing pressure plate nozzle, the upper spring collar with the guide tube with the red bush guide bushing float, elastometric bumper tip bumper, and white guide bushing with the lower spring collar. Alright, a brace support should be installed with the bottom of the guide tube as well, with one near the top of the possible. Very important with the proper blade with the support with the guide tube with the bracing with the gauge of the device. But ensure not all other lines that are out of alignment. The one welding complete. Inspect the guide carefully to ensure the surface is free of any of the weld spatter gouge of the weld. Spatter must be removed. The gouges must be smoothed out once the guide is clean. Tube is clean. Cycle with the float up and down with the full length of the tube with the verify the float that does not come into contact with structural elements. Install bumper the guide tube with the dropping it flat sides down with the elastometric bumper tip pointing up. Remove the gauge drive from packaging and install that there are no metal fillings on the magnet. Insert the gauge drive magnet and first some of the guide tube with the frill. The guide tube with the glide prevention station of freezing in the cold and water. Fill the guide with a tube with about 12 inches of the top of the place the top bushing over the gauge with the topping over the guide tube with the gauge rod which will extend approximately a half inch above the top of the bushing. Screw the cap of the guide tube over the end of the gauge rod with the top bushing with the shipping of the card. Install with the instruction placard underside with the protective housing so that the instructions are visible with the device is operated with making the instruction placard with the repainting of the protective housing cover. 14. Pressure plate. Assemble the pipe of the gauging device with other fittings placed on the ground with the be sure with the gauging device is underside with the assembly float cannot support the weight of the some of the magnets for the tracking filling with the pressure plate. All weight assembly is lowered into the tank with the greater care to make sure that the float does not come in contact with anything going into the tank. Should be guided very carefully with the cover of the non-vertical drop. The installation will be most likely to result in floating hitting the nozzle. And that is your instructions for the magnet gauge device threaded version.